Hello and welcome to the podcast. I'm Onyx and with me is my co-host.
Hi, I'm Kilobyte.
And on today's special episode, we have another fantastic guest with us, Jim Sorenson.
Sorenson, that's right. You got
Sorenson,
it.
Welcome,
writer
welcome.
of Beast Wars Uprising, co-author of several IDW Transformers lore books, worked on the Enigma of Combinations by Renegade Game Studios, a huge contributor to the Transformers Collectors Club, and so much more. Thank you so much for being here.
You're very welcome. Glad to be here.
Fantastic. Shall we get started?
Let's do it.
All right, the hardest question of them all. Let's start with you telling us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. What would you like to know?
Whatever you're welcome to share. Maybe a little bit of maybe your backstory, where you're from, or things that make you you.
Sure. Well, I'm from New York originally. These days, I live in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I was squarely in the crosshairs of their targeted demo. And I remember that first commercial for the Marvel, ostensibly for the Marvel comics with Optimus Prime barreling onto the scene, and I just thought it looked really, really great. Never really fell out of love with it. There were little periods where there were lulls because there wasn't a lot coming out that was grabbing my interest, but then usually something would come along to reinvigorate my interest in the franchise. I remember the picking up Transformers issue number 69 from Marvel and seeing all the classic characters in it, but obviously in this sort of context of interacting with all the new toys. And I was just intrigued. And then that went away. I tried to keep the torch burning. And then Transformers Generation 2 came out. And my family was extremely excited about that because it meant they were able to find Christmas presents for me again. And they tried to keep me from learning about it. But I did learn about it, but I had a very nice Christmas in 1993. So yeah, I've been a fan of the brand for a long time. I've been contributing professionally since 2007. It's fun work if you can get it.
That's awesome. You mentioned, the comics and the shows and the series. Can you tell us a little bit of your process you go through when writing and putting things together in the stories or the books that you've helped write and create?
I would say I approach each book differently. When I was working, my first published works were the ARC books, which were animation models from the 80s. And when I was doing that, it was all about the research. It was all about finding the art, restoring the art. Sometimes we were able to get our hands on art, but it wasn't very good. It maybe had been inked over, it had been photocopied a few times. It was a little bit blurry. So there it was just about finding it. Whereas when I was working with the second books I was working on were the Allspark Almanacs. And in that case, there was no issue at all with finding the material. I lived in Los Angeles at the time, so I could just drive to Cartoon Network and bring a hard drive, and they would just give me whatever files I wanted. So I didn't have to worry at all about tracking stuff down. And consequentially, the scope of the book expanded, quite dramatically, and we focused more on giving the characters unique voices and sort of exploring, pushing the boundaries of what we could explore. And that was a lot of fun. And then each subsequent project has its own challenges, has its own strengths, the things that make it a unique project, like the Art of Prime. That was fun because I got to work with all of the people of the show that was currently in production, and there the goal was to really make the art pop as much as possible. If I'm writing fiction, it's different than if I'm doing archival work or something that's somewhere in between, like the Almanacs. When I was doing Beast Wars Uprising, it was all about just telling the best stories we could, sometimes within constraints that were imposed upon me by editorial. If there was a specific character that they wanted to push, or there was a specific event that they wanted to do. I remember when I was writing for Ask Vector Prime, we knew that we were going to break the concept of singularities, that we were going away from them. So I got to tease that we were doing some of that. So when there's a specific editorial mandate, you try and make the work build up to that in a way that is still organic and feels natural and works with the characters that you've established.
That
That's very
sounds like it's
interesting and fun.
really fun. Yeah.
Yeah, trying to keep the fun is a big part of it. I do this because I love it. I therefore want to make sure that when I'm doing it, I'm having fun. And if something is a slog, then I'm doing something wrong. Maybe I need to step away from it or change my approach, or let somebody else take the steering wheel for a while.
I do have an extra question on that. At the beginning, we didn't have a lot of the established lore for the primes and all that. How's that changed now that we have a little bit more established books and like lore specific to them that we're trying to interconnect with everything now moving forward?
That's a very big picture question, and I think when I'm writing, I tend to be in the trenches. So it's usually a conversation between me and my editor, and if there are other creators involved, then they get looped in as well. But for example, when I was working on the Transformers One source book for Renegade Studios, they wanted to do a section on the 13 because the 13 were in that movie. The actual lore of the movie, it's one roughly 90-minute movie, so there's only so much material. So that was a good source book to expand into other areas for. And they thought it'd be fun to cover sort of everyone who had ever been in the 13. So their chapter on the 13 has, around about 18 or so guys in it, which is kind of amusing, but it reflects the conceptual history of how the 13 evolved. And there wasn't any, to my knowledge, certainly not expressed to me, mandate from Hasbro to make it all interconnected. So I was looking backwards mostly rather than forwards as to what had been done before. And one of the things that I had done when I was writing S Vector Prime was reflect the 13 into the Greco-Roman pantheon of deities, and of course, not everyone who'd ever been a 13 was reflected in that project. So I got to revisit that idea with some other people who had maybe come along since or who hadn't been there, like Quintus Prime, and say, okay, well, who might he be? Well, that might be reflected in Janus, someone who has more than one face. And that was kind of fun for me to get to do. But it wasn't, to your question, it wasn't about trying to make sure that every time we hit the 13 in the future, they're all consistent, because I don't think that is going to be the case. Every time Transformers has ever revisited an old idea, the new writers always understandably want to put their own spin on it. So to the extent that we might see the 13 in, say, Skybound, it's probably not going to be exactly the same as how the 13 might be portrayed in a movie or in something like Cyberverse or in any other comics from any other publishers that might come out or guidebooks. So I think that's some of the joy of Transformers, is that the concepts evolve and change over time. And for the most part, people aren't too precious about it. They're not too locked in, both creators and executives and fans, or I should not both, but among all of those groups, people are willing to accept that when there's some new story, there's some new spin, there's some new way to make the 13, if they're going to be a part of that project, interesting and relevant, or if Primus and Unicron are there to make them feel like they're of the moment, or maybe they're not in it at all. I've done a lot of work on Transformers Animated. I'm still involved in the Transformers Animated fan comics that are coming out now, and that's a universe where the 13 probably don't exist, and Primus probably doesn't exist. To the extent that he might get referenced at all, it would be as a concept rather than as this sort of physical entity that you could go visit and interact with. And I think that's pretty cool that the franchise is that flexible.
Yeah, it allows more diversity and more storytelling. It's not locked into a single strand, right?
Yeah. You could say ever transforming.
Well, it's perhaps not a coincidence that a property that has transformation built into its very DNA would be flexible in that way, in a way that a property that is more, building on itself and pretty much has one set of canon, something like, say, Star Trek, where there's everything that's shown on screen is canon. That's Memory Alpha. for the wiki, and then anything that's not, anything that's from a comic or a book, that's sort of non-canon and is memory beta. Whereas with Transformers, sort of there's no overriding. Whatever is canon is whatever is relevant to that one particular story. Maybe the for the Marvel comics, right? That they're canon to itself, and then there have been a few projects that have spun off of them. Beast Wars borrowed elements from them, and various other comics have tried to continue that. So presumably the U.S. Marvel comics are canon for G2, and also for like the I think not Wings of Honor, the other one that the fan club did that was sort of continuing that, and then for something like Regeneration 1, or even the another Time and Place story that Furman had written back in the day. So you have one seed, but it branches off in a whole bunch of different directions.
Yeah. Awesome. I'm going to push this along to the next question. What
Sure.
inspired you to create/decipher the different Cybertronian fonts?
I was procrastinating. That was I was doing that instead of doing work that I was supposed to be doing, mostly studying because I was in college at the time. But I had discovered HTML, and I'd made a little website, and I collected a bunch of alien language fonts that other people had created for Star Wars and Babylon 5, and I thought it was a shame that we didn't have some for Transformers and some other properties that I was able to get references for. I mean, this is the early 90s, so just getting high quality images to work from was something of an issue. But I wound up making stuff for Autobots and Decepticons, and for Predator, and they still use that Predator font today, and for The Last Starfighter, the Rylodian language.
Oh, I remember that movie.
That's very cool.
That was a fun one. And I just threw them out into the ether. I put them online. I put a free license for personal use, and if you wanted to use it for commercial use, you should contact me. Eventually the Transformers fonts got used in official capacities, and the more they got used, the more other people would pick up on them and use them. And it's and obviously there have been a lot of different Transformers languages, visual written languages over the years. The first ones being the ones for Maximal and Predacon, and those were the ones. I didn't create those, but I deciphered them, and I made true type versions that would line up to what was on the screen. And that was really cool. That was just fun because I could watch Beast Wars, and I had laser discs of them. I'm dating myself here. But I had high quality versions, so I could freeze it and get a pretty good look at what the characters looked like. So I was able to make my fonts pretty accurate, but it also meant that I could, from context clues, figure out what the language said. I think the first words I got were shield failure, because it was just, they were saying, the shields are failing, and you had characters flashing on the screen. And I said, well, if I was making a TV show, I would make that say shield failure, and sure enough, it did. And you could work it out just by the reuse of letters,
using common letters. Yeah,
the I in shield and the I in failure, lining up, and once I assumed that those were the correct letters, you could look at other screen grabs, and they also helped because sometimes they would just run the alphabet in a row, and that would help me with letters like J that weren't as likely to show up in other places.
That's funny.
But I just did that for fun, and then I would go on Alt Toys Transformers and post my translations and say, oh, in this episode this sequence says this, and sometimes they were sort of didactically or they were that's not the right word. Sometimes they were like diegetic to the show. It would be something that would actually be in the universe, but then other times, it would just be a joke. It's been a long time since I've had sweet thistle pie or something. And, at one point in Beast Machines, one of the Viacons, they would use the Predacon script. Their heads up display said, if you can read this, seek help. So I feel like, and I took that personally. So that was fun. But it's neat.
That's funny.
That stuff that you just sort of throw out into the universe, like seeds that you're scattering to the wind, that would actually blossom and grow into this. Now it's on the fonts that I created in the 90s, they're on all the packaging, and it's something I'm known for. It was something that I did sort of before I did my professional work.
The power of procrastination at its fullest.
Exactly, right. I mean, I did well enough in college that certainly the whatever better grade I might have gotten probably wouldn't have impacted my life as much as being the guy who wrote the the Autobot language.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's a neat thing. Whenever people around me sort of get worried that the actions they're taking aren't enough to sort of make the world a better place, I like to tell that story because it's something I just did on a lark, on a whim, and threw out into the universe. And the world is like a measurably, demonstrably different place. Not maybe in important ways, but certainly in observable ways because of that. So you never know, when you're holding the door open for someone, or if you're giving a couple bucks to someone on the street who's hungry, or if you're holding a sign for something that you believe in, like what impact you're having.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's hard to trace those. It's hard to trace the way those little things go off and maybe make
a little
somebody else.
domino effect, I think, is what the humans say.
Exactly.
And they add up. So moving on to our next question, who has been your biggest inspiration?
Biggest inspiration? Oh, I don't know if I work in that way. I don't know if I look at someone and say, oh man, they're doing something cool. I could do that too. There are certainly writers that I admire and I like their work, but I don't usually then say, let me try to. Well, in terms of like Transformers, I love Simon Furman. I love the work that he's done. I love the way Marty Eisenberg can craft such a clean story and set everything up in Act 1 and pay everything off by Act 3. I'm really enjoying what they're doing with Skybound these days. I really like the first arc of 24 issues or so, and there's a lot of people who do a lot of interesting writing work in Transformers, but I don't know if that really.
We'll take it.
Yeah, we've been digging our way through the Skybound reviews, and they're pretty fun. They're definitely different, which is nice.
They are. They have a different tone to them than, say, well, I mean, every Transformers comic series certainly has had its own identity. The Marvel Transformers comics, the IDW certainly had very involved plots that they would do. There's very few images that stick with me the same way some of what Skybound is doing. The one that perhaps competes a little bit was when Pharma was challenging, I guess, Ratchet to a surgery off and wanted him to repair something in half. And
such an iconic scene.
Yeah, but I feel like Skybound manages to do something like that, once every 4 or 5 months, and I feel like IDW, it's just not what IDW was going for, or where their strengths lay.
Yeah, it's definitely a little bit more eye-catching, and I think that's definitely what they want the readers to go into a comic book store and be like, oh, what is that? That looks very cool, and I'm interested to see why Shockwave doesn't have a head anymore. It's just a little light bulb, stuff like that.
Yeah. Pushing us along to our next question, which character or story do you think doesn't get written about enough?
Gee, that's an interesting one. I think the best stories are going to be the ones where the author feels strongly about a character. So sort of whichever one needs to be written about is the one where Furman or Bob or Barber or Roberts or Roach or Kirkman has something that they want to talk about. Certainly I feel like my stronger stories are the ones where I had a story I was yearning to tell, or a character I was burning to tell. So I don't think the way I'd want to answer that is like, oh well, we need to learn more about Micronus Prime. Do we? We need to know about the characters that the writers want to put forward. That said, me as a writer, I am very interested in sort of newer characters that don't necessarily have 40 or 30 years of history. I think we've had a lot of stories about, the 84 cast and not quite as many about the 85 cast, but still, quite a lot. These characters have had
Hmm.
many showcases, and I'm more interested in sort of the breakout characters that have come along, maybe this century. So I like to see more about knockout and breakdown. I'd like to see more about guys like Bulkhead and Lugnut and Lockdown.
Star Drive would be cool.
Start well, maybe. I mean, it's certainly it's an interesting idea. I don't know what story I would tell with that character, and part of me thinks a little bit of the Nemesis as sort of an alt mode for Triptychon. Kind of the stuff that was happening around Prime and whatnot. So it's hitting a story beats that I feel like have already been told a little bit. Although you'd have to hit it in a different way with a different character. I like the robots in disguise, new characters, especially some of the bad guys.
There's so many.
Thunderhoof,
Yeah,
was it
yeah. I mean,
Thunderhoof or
that was it was nice to see.
Mhm.
And some of them I've used in my work. I used Bisque quite a bit. I used Steeljaw and Thunderhoof a bit, but more of those sort of eras. I used Simicora a little bit in one of the role playing books. But like characters like that, I think they're worth exploration. Certainly, they're characters that I, as a writer, would be interested in exploring and maybe seeing them interact with some of the classic guys. But I'd be hesitant to tell some other writer like, oh, you got to use these guys, because maybe this writer, maybe they're yearning to tell a big Carnivac story, and I wouldn't want to
Mhm.
get in the way of that. If that's the character that sings to them, then that's the character I think they should write about.
That's fair.
Yeah, that's fair. Yep. So moving to our next question, who is your favorite Transformers character and why?
Shockwave. I love Shockwave. The first Transformers
Classic.
comic I picked up was issue number 5, Marvel, and it's got that classic Shockwave painted cover, and he's got the Autobots hanging up like slabs of beef, and he's he's got a great profile to him. He's a striking visual image. We were talking about that a couple minutes ago. He just has such a distinctive look to him compared to most of the other characters. His face, his gun, his gun arm. His personality is great. I like especially the way Bob would write him. Where he was the sort of mirror universe Spock kind of. Logic demands that I be the leader. He could be argued out of a position, which just isn't really true for Megatron or Starscream. I thought his power set was pretty neat. The control over the electromagnetic spectrum. He just sort of hits all those buttons. But I never say, "Oh, we need more writing about Shockwave," because there've been so many great Shockwave stories.
Yeah.
W
Oh,
Senator Shockwave story, and the current run. I thought I liked him musing about, oh, the Earth's oceans are so beautiful. It's a shame I'm going to have to destroy them.
Yes.
It's a nice moment. I actually picked up some original artwork from the current series of him. I got the 2-page spread of him headless. So that's something that I have. I have a lot of Shockwave originals. That one's the latest one, but I have some. I have Marcelo Materi Shockwave cover that's like a close up of his face and Optimus Prime shadows in the background.
That's cool.
Yeah, I just dig the character. He's a lot of fun.
He is very fun.
do you have any favorites of the Autobots by chance?
They're not as special to me. I'm more of a Decepticon guy, but there's a few Autobots that really sing to me. Sentinel Prime, especially animated Sentinel Prime and Transformers One Sentinel Prime, are a lot are characters that I respond to, which might be cheating a bit because they're uh, They are both antagonists. I will insist that Sentinel Prime in Transformers Animated is not a villain. He's very much an antagonist, but he's not a villain. He means very well, but if he were to get his way, the outcome would be bad. So you could call him a fool or a buffoon, but not a villain. Obviously, Transformers One Sentinel Prime is a straight up villain. So, but John Hamm really sells the character. Townsend Coleman, of course, does a great job with him in the animated version too. So, yeah, I like Vector Prime as a writer. I like Vector Prime. He's a fun voice. I like how wise he is and how strong he is and how much he's seen. And it's an interesting perspective. Somebody who can sort of dip in and out of the multiverse. I actually don't love multiversal storytelling. I think Rick and Morty does a good job of deconstructing it and sort of showing how, if you do exist in a multiverse, it's hard to find any meaning in anything. In a way that Transformers storytelling does. Usually Transformers storytelling uses multiverses as a way
That's the movie where they said they got to go back, right? To the future?
Back to the Future. They certainly borrowed some of the aesthetics of the Back to the Future films. Now, Rick and Morty is a current ongoing cartoon about dimension travelers, but they have a similar dynamic of a sort of old man scientist and young naive boy that have their adventures. Back to the Future is a great few movies, and my dad's a big fan of it, and I got him the Gigawatt Transformer character of the Doc Brown's Time Machine. So that was kind of fun.
I got one of those too. They're very fun.
Yeah. The wheels are a bit fiddly, but other than that,
I like the welding goggles for their like visor and optics.
I thought the box art was really good.
Yeah,
it was evocative of the original G1 box art. But yeah, Vector Prime being able to sort of dip in and out of the universe to talk about various different Transformers franchises was a fun character for me to write. So as far as Autobots go, and I did recently track down because I think I had some, but I couldn't find them. But I tracked down all three of the original decos of the original Vector Prime toy to have the three of them and play around with them. So that was fun.
Nice.
And then I'm a big Sideways fan. I know he's not quite an Autobot either, but sometimes he is. So, but again, it's a cheat because I don't respond to him as an Autobot. I respond to him not so much as a Decepticon, but as a trickster, as someone who's maybe a little faction fluid.
Yeah.
That's what I like about him.
Cool. Well, we talked about Gigawatt Toy, and this goes perfect into our next question. What are your top 3 favorite figures that you own or would like to own?
My favorite answer.
It just sounds just what? I hesitate to say of all time because I feel like if I say that I'm going to be wrong.
But, I guess from your collection, like what you have.
Well, my collection is extensive.
Aren't we all?
I really, really, really like the G2 Laser Optimus Prime, the original. That to me, that was just a perfect Optimus Prime toy. It had everything I needed it to do. It was posable. It lit up. It fired missiles. It had its interactive trailer. I loved that toy. And I was living in Japan in the late 90s, and when Black Convoy came out, Scourge in America, I just thought it was such a great visual update on it. I kind of wish they hadn't gutted the electronics, but I always intended to get a Junker Laser Prime and pull out the guts and put it into a Black Convoy figure, but I never got around to it.
Oh, that'd be cool.
Yeah. I love that mold. I just think it's fantastic. If they'd ever come out with the Toxitron in that original mold, I would have been all over that too. So that one is way high up there. That's probably my favorite toy. But then after that, I have a very strong recency bias. It's the
Hmm.
figures that I like to pick up and fiddle with. I was playing with the DevCon figure they came out with recently, and that one's just fun to flip back and forth from one mode to the other. I will say I tend to respond more to toys that are a little bit on the simpler side. I like stuff that I could transform in a minute or two, not
Hmm.
stuff that
Hmm.
feels like work. Like I
Yeah,
remember when
56 steps.
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Like the HasLab Unicron takes you
Well,
33
I
minutes
never
to know
got
what you're
that,
doing.
and I'm glad I didn't, because that was the correct choice for me. And I've had someone
Hmm.
say, "Oh, but you could have turned around and sold it." And I said, "Well,
Uh,
counterpoint, could I have? I mean, I
yeah.
don't own a shipping company, so you know, that's it's so some figures owning them is a burden, and
Hmm.
I prefer figures that aren't. I really like the original Jetfire mold, and I probably respond more to the various Macross and Robotech versions of it. That it's the same toy, but different colors and maybe a different head. But that toy is one of the ones where when I first got it, in the '80s, I it just felt so cool, so hefty. It's simple, but it's beautiful. So because you said it didn't necessarily have to be Transformers, so
Hmm.
that one might be one of my top three. And
Nice.
then what would and then for three, I'm just going to say, like, whatever toy I got most recently that I like, because sometimes I get into toys and it's just like, oh, I can't quite figure this one out. Like I just got the Leech Maximo toy, and I actually love it.
Oh, I
I
can't
think
wait
it's
till I
great.
get that one.
Yeah, we're
I
still
think it's very
waiting for
pretty.
ours. It takes a longer time to get to Cybertron, so it's
Hmm.
just
No, yeah, no. It takes time to ship interstellar distances, but that's not like I like it a lot. I think it's really cool, but I didn't love sort of the transformation on it. Like it's fine as an evil avocado. Like I don't mind that. The actual process of turning him from an evil robot into an evil avocado, I didn't love. But yeah, the my third figure, whatever I got most recently, that sort of fits that criteria of enough simplicity and enough sort of posability.
Hmm.
I'm looking on my shelf. I'm looking at guys like DevCon and G-Axis and the Scrounge that they did with the Technobot gift set. Like I could just pick those toys up, fiddle with them, all day while I'm working on something else, and they're a lot of fun.
Fantastic. Moving us to our next question. Do you have any side projects you are currently working on? Of course, this only includes ones you can talk about. We understand NDAs.
Sure. Well, I will say I have had a lot of fun working on the Transformers animated comics. I've been doing
Oh,
AllSpark
nice.
Almanac pages for all of them, and the first issue of Mirror Mirror just came out a couple months ago, and that sold extremely well, which is gratifying. And we did 12 pages of Mirror Universe profiles in that, and there's going to be three more issues, and all of them are going to have more almanac pages about the characters that show up in those issues, and maybe some that don't. That one's been a lot of fun to work on, and it's while they're not licensed, they're unofficial fan comics. It's been really fun to work with Marty Eisenberg and Eric Siebenaler, people who were with Transformers Animated at the very beginning, and can kind of make sure that we're hitting the right aesthetics and the right story tone. So it's fun to work on those. And if you haven't checked them out yet, I would urge you to do so.
yeah,
When
no,
can we
no, we
expect the next couple issues to come out?
I'm not exactly sure. I think I don't want to speak out of turn. I
Hmm.
don't know exactly when. I know that TFCon and BotCon are coming up next month, and I feel like there's a pretty good chance we'll be able to sell them by then. But don't take that to the bank. I'm not I'm not really involved in the sort of production side of it.
Oh, no
Sounds good.
worries. We'll keep we'll keep an
Hmm.
optic out, and we'll review them when we get them.
Yeah, funny story behind that. I'd done some earlier Transformers fan comics, and at one point, and I wanted to help out, and because I appreciate what what they're doing. Kean Carlisle is the main sort of driver behind that. He's one of he writes or co-writes most of them, and he does all the production side of things. He handles the printing and the distribution. And I had told him, because I'd worked with him on some other projects, I said I wanted to help out, and I offered to write some Allspark Almanac pages. So for the Bumble Prime comic that they did a regular edition and a special edition. And the special edition had the Almanac pages, and the regular one didn't. And I think we sold them for $25 for the regular edition and $30 for the special edition. And as it turns out, basically nobody wanted the $25 version. People only wanted the $30 version.
Oh, no.
So we kind of learned our lesson and said, okay, from now on, we will just, like, it's fine to do multiple covers, but we will only do the stuff with the almanac content. We're not gonna have an almanac and a non-almanac version because nobody will buy the almanac version. And I started calling it the broccoli edition because at one point Kean said he's not going to print any more of the special edition until we sell out of the regular edition. So, hence,
well, I think that's a good problem to have, I think.
it is. They've sold very well, and I believe at this point we have sold out of the edition. So, but
nice.
we've learned our lesson. We're not going to we're not going to assume that anybody. We're going to assume if we do a deluxe edition that's the one that everyone's going to want.
Yeah.
So the deluxe edition is just the regular edition now.
That's good. Well, moving on to our next question. What is something no one knows about you that you wish more people did know, if you have anything?
Something no one knows about me. I don't know if there's anything no one knows about me because I'm a pretty public guy. But I'm in addition to doing Transformers writing and production, I do have a pretty substantial collection of Transformers original art, and it's I kind of like showing that off. So that's I mentioned the 2-page spread from Skybound, but I've got a whole lot of Transformers pieces. I wouldn't want to estimate a number, but it's in the dozens probably. So I enjoy Transformers original art, especially covers and splash pages.
That's cool.
Thank you.
Awesome. And we're winding down towards the end. Are there any questions for us?
So Onyx, I'm obviously familiar with you, but Kilobyte, what's your deal? What's your faction? What's your function?
So I am a mini-con. I saw a lot of my colleagues in the Transformers Armada show, and so I decided to embark and go on this adventure, and I met Onyx and Clickbait, and so I am a mini-con. I'm kind of neutral right now. Everything's nice up here on Cybertron, so there's no really conflicts. But yeah, just trying to learn more and explore and connect more with the Cybertronian world out there.
And what do you turn into?
I turn into a little stealth plane,
Oh, okay.
or at least that's what I've been told. I could fly since I was forged, so I've never seen a little stealth plane before, so I'm not quite sure if that's the correct term for them. But that's what Clickbait and Onyx said when they visited Earth.
So what do you think about Sideways?
I really enjoy Sideways. They are one of my favorite characters from Armada. My favorite one is Jetfire. I really liked Jetfire, and I always wanted a figure from Jetfire. And now that they're doing one with the new line, I'm super excited. But Sideways was one of my second favorite characters. I used to play with his figures so much that I lost the minicons. I don't know where they are. So I just have him and no minicons. So I'm very sad, but I'm happy for the new one that they made. So hopefully I find it out there.
I remember Aaron Archer saying that he lost his headmasters when he was a kid. So whenever he was doing a toy that was a headmaster, he made sure that there was something that was ahead, even if you lost the pieces. So if Sideways, obviously without his minicons, still has his head, and so does the Omega Supreme that they did in Energon. So
yeah,
I appreciated that from. Although as a big headmaster guy, I do think it'd be a little weird if I pretty much went all in on the Titans Return line, and they definitely would look weird if they all had little stubby heads on them.
That is true. That is true. But I am a big fan of mini cons, so I try to collect as
I
many
love
mini
them.
cons as I can. So I'm very excited. I'm a little sad with when they redid the Armada characters with the new, Age of the Prime line, and they didn't all come with mini cons. But with the ones that they've made, I'm very happy. So I'm trying to collect as many as I can.
I will say I feel like while I like the sideways motorcycle new toy that they did. I don't love the mini cons because the idea that they need little extra parts to to form the individual robots that felt it felt like a bit of a cheat to me, given that the original mirror didn't need anything to transform from minicon to larger minicon.
Yeah, I saw a review recently because I haven't been able to find a figure. Like all the stores here in Cybertron are sold out, and I'm having trouble get it from Earth. But I saw the review and I saw that they kind of parts form into the individual heads, and then you can combine them to make the combination of the two minicons. And I'm like, that's not what I wanted, but I
Yeah,
guess.
but I kind of I like Sideways well enough without the mini cons, so it's not a deal breaker for me. And I have the original figure somewhere, but it's sort of in a box in my garage somewhere, and it would be a big project to dig it out. And I do really appreciate having a figure that has sort of modern posability to it. So I wonder if I should just get the original mirror and see if that plays nice with the new Sideways.
That's a possibility. It would be
I
interesting
don't know
because
if it does. I mean, I'm sure somebody has done that experiment.
yeah, I
What,
know. I
what
know the
price one
original
might
toy had a hole on top of their head where they would peg in. So I don't think the new one does, because the head just I think hides in the cockpit, and then there's a connector for the minigun specifically.
hmm.
But I would definitely want to check it out. The figure itself looks a little bit thinner than the original. It definitely has been slimmed down. But I'm willing to try it. I'm willing to find it and get it and review it for myself because, watching it through somebody else's perspective or video, it's kind of hard to judge a figure unless you're holding it.
No,
So,
that's very true. One of the new Japanese comics just came out, and they have the Double Face and the Noise Maze versions of Sideways as sort of two different guys, which makes sense because they were two different characters originally. So now I'm wondering if I should pick up the Cybertron Sideways, the Noise Maze version, since I already have the Double Face.
it is cool. I've seen it. I haven't been able to get a hold of it, but it is. I really like that design as well because I don't even know what the vehicle is, but it's kind of
It's
some sort
kind
of
of a
spaceship.
Cybertron bomber-ish thing.
Yeah, but it's a very cool one. I remember those, and I like that it came with the key because I was, I grew up with all those Armada, Energon, and the Cybertron, so with the planet keys and all that. So
Oh, yeah, when I was getting
yeah,
the three Vector Primes, like I had to get the cyber keys. I wanted, like that would have been a deal breaker. I needed the keys, I needed the swords, I needed the minicons. So the missile I was flexible about. I think the Vector Prime, the classic, and again, I'm sure I have the original somewhere, but who knows where. But the one in the classic sort of silver colors was missing his missile. The other two I got.
oh, I see.
But it was so cheap. It was I want to say it was like $10. I mean, it was a steal. I'm not going to
Yeah.
complain about. And again, the missile is just going to be locked in. I'm almost 50. Like I don't do so much pew 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 anymore.
But I keep talking about Armada and minicons, but we'll move on to the next question, and then maybe after we finish recording, we can talk a little bit more. But the next question is, where can the listeners find you? Social medias, your Twitters, your Facebooks, your I don't know,
Sure.
Instagrams.
Yeah, I don't do so much on Instagrams, but I'm on the Twitter, I'm on Blue Sky, I'm on Facebook. I was a bit of an early adopter, so you could just find me at Jim Sorenson. There's no underscores or numbers or spaces or anything. So I was the first Jim Sorenson to sign up for all those services.
Fantastic.
And we'll definitely have all that in the description for the listeners.
Perfect. And our last and probably one of the other hard questions we have for you are there any words of wisdom or something special you would like to say to the listeners?
Yes, and I've said this before, but I think collecting is a hobby that's sort of a two-edged sword. And I think you can bring a lot of joy to yourself collecting. I think it's also possible to sort of go past the joy and get to a point where it can feel like work. And my advice is that when you're in a hobby, understand why you're in the hobby. Understand like what it is that brings you joy about being in the hobby. Maybe it's a certain kind of toy that you like. Maybe it's a level of completionism. Maybe it's you like interacting with the stories, or you like the socializing aspect of it. But whatever it is that brings you joy, that pulls you to the hobby in the first place, like be cognizant of it. Like identify it in your mind as that part that brings you joy, and try to seek that part out, and try to maybe avoid other parts that bring you less joy, or maybe even feel like work. So if you're ever at a point where you're like, oh, I have to get this figure and I don't even want it, maybe don't buy it. Like listen to that little voice of yourself, and don't give in to the FOMO. Just find those parts of the hobby that really satisfy you, and focus on that.
Fantastic.
That's awesome.
And that was our last question. Thank you so much for joining us today. And
Oh, you're
again,
welcome.
listeners, but we'll include all your social medias below. And until next time, till all are one.
Till all
Till
are
our
one.
one.